I didn't really audition. I used to go over to Zurich now and again, which was the studio in Limerick. So I went over and I spoke to the owner at the time, and I told him I was looking for a band to write songs with. Well, about 6 months later, a girl in my class told me they were looking for a singer. And I figured, well, I'm looking for a band too, so I had a keyboard and a guitar, so I played some stuff for them. One song that I'd written and one song, I think a cover or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
And then I think they knew when they heard my voice that I was willing to sing. I mean, we definitely thought that we could do that, you know, be a real band that wrote our own songs and become successful. Noel was our manager at the time, and he was fairly aware of the music industry to a certain point, and I wasn't, absolutely not. And he told me that we should begin by making a demo tape. And I remember thinking that was a really cool word. And I was like, well, that sounds cool, what's that? And he was like, well, it's just you put down your songs and you demonstrate them basically on a tape. And you know, the studio downstairs, if we go in there, we make a demo. And I was like, how much will that cost? And it was like 250 quid or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was more than we could afford anyway at the time.
So we all had part-time jobs and stuff. So we saved up for a long time.
The first record company I sent it to was Rough Trade, because mainly, to be honest, the Smiths ran Rough Trade, and they said, right, we send it there, and they sent a letter back straight away saying, we really like the stuff, but if you can come to London, we'll come and see you. But that money's been going to the moon to us, because we couldn't afford to do that. So it just kind of encouraged us. I remember we went to rehearsal and I had the letter, and we were all kind of, we were in a bit of a buzz about it. Like, it wasn't exactly telling us to go and get lost. So from that then I got just a book with a bunch, every record company address I could, and just kept sending it, and then started ringing every day, and they finally started listening to it. The guy
who managed us was going to produce it, and this was part of the big plan. Basically, we went into that studio to record the first album, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
It just completely did not happen. There was a lot of stress, a lot of tension, whatever.
We were kind of wandering aimlessly for a while. You know, we weren't really sure what to do. And it was Denny Cordell, really, who stepped in and said to us, you know, you have to do this album.
You have to do it.
Who
no
do you want? You got to
it.
find somebody.
I knew Jeff from Rough Trade. I'd met him and I thought he was really nice. And I said to him, you know, will you manage us? And he was like, well, yeah, I don't usually manage bands. He says, I have a record company, but I'll manage you if that's what you need. So he kind of said, okay. And he said he knew Stephen Street and stuff.
Yeah. And
so
we did a trial with Stephen for a week, and we got like 5 songs done in 5 days with Stephen. We worked very quick, and the record company were delighted with what they heard and the fact that we were working so quick. I guess all in all, 8 weeks we recorded and mixed the whole album. We were touring a lot in the UK, and we kind of ignored the press and the backlash as much as we could. And then we went out touring Europe it was our first proper European tour, wasn't it? Yeah, with the Hothouse Flowers. We got the support tour and we thought, great, let's go. You know, because remember at this point we had never really been outside of Ireland that much. We had toured the UK for about 1.5 years, was it? Non-stop, but that's as far as we'd gone. And it kind of, we felt that at that time it wasn't really working in the UK anymore. You know, we had that initial kind of big buzz, and then it died. So when we were offered this European tour, we thought, great. I think for that whole tour, actually, we just lived on, you know, tuna and sweet corn, baked potatoes. We used to invest in a 4-stone bag of spuds and bring them onto the tour bus with a microwave on the bus. And every day, that was our staple, because we'd save up the rest of our money for beer or whatever. And we just ate that crap every day for a month. It was like, to be honest, that tour was like a holiday for us, because we only played a half-hour set every night. We were on about 7:30, finished by 8, and that was it. We were done for the night. So we had a good laugh, but as for getting anywhere with the band, it really didn't do anything. No one knew who we were. You know, the record company had released the album in Europe, but it just died. College radio picked up on Linger, and then by the time we got there, it was huge, yeah. It was on heavy rotation on MTV, so that meant they were playing it every 6 minutes. We could tour here, you know, could go to Dublin and barely get, you know, 20 people in a gig, and we were at the other side of the world. You know, you could play to, you know, 700 or 800 people a night, which for us was, you know, and they knew. We only had one song, you see, and that was Linger. So it was funny, you go on stage and we'd perform the set and everybody'd start singing Linger, and the rest of the gig they're just like, you might like that. And, I remember we got off the plane in Shannon and came out, everyone's kind of jet lagged and, you know, kind of, you're
We
really
didn't
sleepy.
really know that anybody back
Yeah.
here was aware of what we were doing.
And the airport's just full of like photographers
And we're
all
kind of
this
like,
press, and it's like,
you know,
what's
we're
going
kind
on?
of turning around going, Jesus,
Yeah.
is there someone here? And it was like, oh, they're here.
Genuinely,
It was like,
it
how
was
do they
just-
know? You know, we weren't
No
aware
idea.
that back home people were aware of what we were doing over there, you know.
Yeah.
The success didn't really get to us until probably after No Need to Argue, because as Noel said, at this point now we've been touring for maybe 2 years, 2.5 years, and now we're at that point where we're going in to record our second album. But we've never really taken a big career break at this point of our lives. We've just constantly either toured, or you're in the studio, or you do promo, one or the other. So we went straight back into the studio after the first album and that tour, and we started recording No Need to Argue. And I think about 3 or 4 weeks into it, Stephen had this idea that we go skiing so that we keep ourselves fresh and keep the music fresh and stuff. And on the second day of skiing, I went up to the kind of higher slopes and I had a crash. And I ended up in hospital the next day having major surgery. So they kept me in the hospital in Lyon in the south of France for about 10 days. And then when they could fly me back or ship me back, they did, on a wheelchair, coming home in the plane, and landing in London, because I couldn't come back to Ireland because of the press, tabloids. I didn't want to be on papers like all cooked out of my head in morphine, so kind of figured if I go to London I can hide there. I'd say it was about 6 weeks after the accident that I went back into the studio.
Yeah, what was meant to be like a week break was about 6 or 8 weeks. It was pretty long.
No Need to Argue came out, and it just absolutely was massive, way bigger than the first album. And I actually got married, I remember, on the 18th of July, and we had a gig 5 days later that could have been Fela. And I didn't really have any idea what my wedding would be like or anything in Ireland. I didn't think I was a big star, so just went ahead kind of, and my husband flew over and we just went up to Holy Cross Abbey, and the next day it was on the front cover of every paper, and of course that old Irish, ooh, what she wore, you know, it's not exactly LA, you know. But you know, they were kind of giving out about my wedding dress and shit, so it was on the front cover of all these papers. And sometimes it was like, I used to look back and think that the wedding day was like a gig. It was so hectic that year, so many things happened, major surgery, marriage, you know. Oh, it was just like a lot of stuff going on. Well, we kept touring right from 94 and through 95, and then I think at the end of 95 the success of No Need to Argue was massive, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we changed management companies as well.
Yeah,
In the midst of all that.
We had written the album again at soundcheck, but we we had been touring for so long that the way we were writing, we thought, to us, it sounded heavier. You know, it wasn't as soft as you know, Linger or those earlier songs. So we thought, you know, we should change producers to capture this sound that we have now. So we went in, we recorded that album in 5 weeks. We more or less set up live and just played it.
Not being able to remember what exactly happened over the last 2 years of your life is not very healthy, you know. Obviously you've got too much on your plate, you know. So I think we went out on that tour and we toured for about maybe 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, we did a good bit of it, but there was still, even as much as we had done, there was still about a year left in that tour.
And we were all signed, sealed and delivered.
Yeah, and it was just starting to really fall apart.
And I was just like,
know?
I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't whatever.
Yeah.
And getting to that point where you just couldn't switch off because you've crowds around you too much and it's just burnout. So I remember I went to the boys and I just said to them, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I feel really sick, you know, getting panic attacks and stuff.
Once one of us said it, then everyone
Then it was
turned
like,
around
well,
and
I
went,
could
thank
get
God,
panic
I was
attacks
sick
too.
of it as well. I just
I
want
was
to go
like,
home.
okay.
You know, we all thinking the same thing, but who wants to be the one to throw the spanner in the works, you know?
Yeah. But the minute you get sick in the public eye, that's the worst thing, is you're all over the papers, and that's more stress. So the more the media picked up on it and followed me, the worse I got. And I remember I built a house in Dingle when I was on tour. It was a completely insane thing to do, but I thought, great, I'll have this home and I'll escape at the ends of the earth. But it was actually a tourist attraction, and every day this bus used to pull up and all these tourists would come out, oh, the Cranberries, man, or whatever, taking photos. It was pretty freaky at the time, you know. In order to pull the tour, I went to see about 10 doctors, as you do for insurance, obviously, reasons. Then I went to see a psychiatrist in London, and he basically said to me, he was a guy who saw celebrities. And he was kind of saying you have to kind of get out the public eye for maybe a year or something. Unless you do, you'll probably not be able to survive. So I just went off to these islands then off at the Caribbean, and I spent a long time just trying to mentally learn how to sleep and learn how to relax and how to not do anything some days, because I was just kind of so used to rushing all the time and doing stuff that I couldn't handle not doing stuff. You know, the silence was deafening. At the time I kind of said, I don't think I'll ever sing again, you know. I just don't want that life anymore. I don't want to ever feel like this again, you know. So it was kind of like, I thought I'd never recover at the time. But funny, you know, when you're going through something, a nervous illness, like, you look back years later and you wonder, what happened? You know, how did I let that happen? But it wasn't necessarily me, but it's just a super unnatural life for a teenager and for a girl or whatever, you know. So I went off to Canada and I decided to have him there, and it was really quiet and peaceful up in the forest, and it was really cool. Like, and I think about just before he was born, you phoned me, didn't you? Or I phoned you or something.
I had been kind of working and stuff at home, little bits. I think I sent you over a tape then, and you rang to say that you had written some lyrics and that. So I got the two boys together here in Limerick, and we got a little room, ran through stuff with them, and then you said you felt up for a bit of singing, so we flew over to Canada, and we rehearsed for about a week or two, and then we hired a studio out for about another week or so, and went in and just started kind of putting down what we thought would be demos, but ended up being the next album. We just slowly kind of got into it that way again.
We just wanted to go back to where we started, like our first album, and just be a bunch of kids and see if we could write songs again. It was just so much for us so quickly that it was just too bad, really, you know. We didn't do very much promotion. We only did a tiny bit.
And a very small tour.
And a select few dates, basically. And on that tour, it was like, I used to fly out. I just hired a private jet, and I just fly out of Shannon. When it was in Europe, I'd just fly out of Shannon to, say, Paris on Monday, do the gig in Paris, and come off stage after the gig, drive in a car back to the airport and fly back here to my home. So I was back home at 2 or 3 in the morning, and tomorrow was a day off. And I'd wake up and I'd be like, was I on stage last night in front of, 18,000 people, or was that just my imagination? And the next day you're here at home in the country in Ireland, and then tomorrow you get up and you fly out and you do your gig again. So I was in and out and in and out. There was a lot of travelling. But for me, that was the only way I could do it. I wasn't going to give it all and go back there. I was just kind of egging my way back, feeling the territory, you know.
We started writing again back here. We started rehearsing. Once we finished the tour, we took time off a few months and then got back rehearsing together. And once we had a collection of songs together, we thought everybody kind of felt up for putting a bit more into it again, I think. And everybody was in a kind of good headspace, I think. So we got back in touch with Steve, and he was well up for it. He was really happy to give it a go again. So we went in and we recorded the whole album in Dublin, just mixed it in London then over 2 weeks. But we just really enjoyed it. We'd record during the day, and then at night we'd go out afterwards. Just kind of, it was very, very relaxed. I'd like to think they've matured. I don't think we could sit down and write a song like Linger or Dreams again, That was 12 years ago now. You're still always going to know it's us. To this point anyway, you would always know, straight away it's a Cranberries song. But I'd like to think that, we're getting better at songwriting every time. Because the thing is, when we began, we were only starting out. I'd only started kind of playing a year before that. So as we're going along, we're learning every time. So as each album goes by, I think we're learning how to write more. And
it's a little bit less mainstream as well, the stuff that we've been writing in the last few years, more aggressive guitar and stuff like that. It's nice to have a bit of But the thing is, of course, it's difficult to get like edgy rock songs played on the radio, so more than likely they won't go as well as a poppy single. But nonetheless, there's absolutely many bands over the years that had huge careers through albums and songwriting as opposed to singles, so we prefer that kind of a thing anyway. It's for us, it's kind of like a great milestone now, like 5 albums is a lot of albums, and I don't think we ever anticipated when we started out that we'd be together this long or get this far. And actually, as Noel said, we feel like we've done the whole circle, like to live to tell the tale or whatever. I mean, starting here and going like this, and almost like falling over the edge, but actually managing to hold on to your sanity and coming around. And we feel like now we have a strong fan base that are very loyal to us, and that will be there, and we can really afford to do whatever, different projects, have some fun, take a year out. We've done it already, take a year and a half out and 2 years out and they're still there when you come back. So I think we're in a kind of a position in life now where we feel pretty, we have no major stress, and this is a pinnacle in our careers, and I think after this album we'll probably experiment for a while.
Dolores and I have talked over the last few weeks a lot, you know, and about what way to go next. And I think we're both of the opinion, you know, it's time to kind of maybe take it a different direction for a while. We've kind of, the sound we've had over the last 5 albums, you know it's us now straight away. I think we're kind of both interested in kind of experimenting, maybe with that sound but taking it another direction. We're not surely really clear, I guess, yet what direction, but you know, we've been talking on the phone
We'll wing it.
Yeah, and saying, you know, to go into the studio maybe with nothing and just see what happens, you know.